We are live now.
Good evening. Call to order a meeting of the Normal Town Council for Monday, September 21st, 2020. Please call the roll.
Mayor Coos,
Here.
Mr. McCarthy,
Here.
Ms. Cummings,
Here.
Mr. Nord,
Here.
Ms. Smith,
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Here.
Mr. Preston.
We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The governor has issued a disaster declaration related to public health concerns caused by the statewide COVID-19 pandemic. As mayor, I've determined that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent because of the risk of exposure to the COVID-19 virus stemming from an indoor gathering, and that a remote meeting is in the best interest of the health, safety, and welfare of the council, the staff, and the general public. We have two commenters in public comment. The first commentor is Brad McMillan. Oh, here you are, Brad. The rules of public comment are, please state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes. So,
yeah, thank you, Mayor Coos, and good evening to the members of the Normal Town Council. My name is Brad McMillan, and I live at 505 Normal Avenue in Old North Normal Historic District. I am speaking tonight in opposition to doubling the normal gas tax 4 cents per gallon effective December 1st. Raising the gas tax during this pandemic will hurt those normal residents most who have lost jobs or significant income during these historically challenging times. Dr. Anthony Fauci recently stated that fall and winter could be very difficult for Americans as the flu season arrives on top of the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. Adding to the stress of those currently struggling financially and normal will make life even more difficult during the duration of the pandemic. Doubling the normal local gas tax during a historic pandemic and recession would be, in my opinion, unwise public policy. And you wonder if the council even would be considering this issue tonight if gas prices were $3 per gallon like they were not long ago. My street on Normal Avenue in the heart of our community has potholes and areas with crumbling sidewalks. I agree that we need to have improvements in infrastructure. Let's work together to find responsible ways to make this happen without adding to the heavy burden of those less fortunate in our community during this already tough time. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your meeting.
our next speaker is Patrick Dillard.
Patrick has been admitted.
He's not with us yet, but I see the icon joining. Ah,
Hello?
Mr. Dillard, thank
Hello?
you. Yes,
Oh, thank you, Mayor. My name is Patrick Dillard. I reside on Broadway and Normal. Speaking before you tonight in support of the increase in the motor fuel tax. I think it's important to equal Bloomington in terms of the motor fuel tax, especially on the commodity-based tax. I think that the motor fuel tax spreads the tax around to many users of the road system, including many out-of-towners, therefore lessening the burden on normal residents. A tax like this makes sense to me. If I average 10,000 miles a year and 20 miles a gallon, the additional cost to me is about $20 a year. And I think I could spare that in the name of better roads. So I'd urge the council to support increasing the motor fuel tax. Thank you.
that concludes our public comment. We move to the omnibus vote agenda. Items considered routine and will be taken by a single vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. And I've got to bring up.
I'd like to pull item B, Mayor.
Kathleen Lorenz was first.
Yes, I've got two items to pull, B and E.
Mr. Preston,
Yep, I will pull C and D.
There's nothing left to pull for me.
there's nothing left to pull except motion for approval, please.
So moved.
Second.
Minutes or items considered under the omnibus vote are approval of the minutes of the special meeting of September 2nd, 2020, approval of the minutes of the work session of September 8th, 2020, and approval of minutes of the regular council meeting of September 8th, 2020. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings, Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. Item B is a report to receive and file town of normal of expenditures for payment as of September 16th, 2020.
So
Ms.
moved, please.
Thank you.
Second.
Ms. Lorenz?
Okay, thank you. I did lower my hand. Okay, on the item B, that is the bills to receive and file them. And just want to remind my colleagues here that what we are doing is receiving and filing these items. Reminder that these are expenses already approved either through the budget of 2021 or previous action taken by this council. So I encourage us to respectfully not relitigate any of these items. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Further comment? I see none. Please call the roll.
Ms. Cummings, Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. Report to receive and file is approved. Item C is a resolution authorizing execution of an intergovernmental agreement with Illinois State University pertaining to fire protection service. Mr. Thank you.
Yep, move approval.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Preston?
Thanks, Mayor. Just wanted to call attention to this item as one more example and longstanding example of good cooperation between the town of Normal and Illinois State University. This agreement where the town offers fire protection services for the university has been in place for about 50 years or so. And following a state-wide formula that's used at all university communities, we are able to get reimbursed, and it's looking like we are expecting a just under $605,000 budget impact in terms of revenue to the town. And overall, it just makes a lot of sense, and it's worth highlighting, things that are common sense, make sense, and are good, being a good community partner with the university.
Further on this item? Mr. Nord.
Thank you. Let me get my hand down. All right. I brought this up last year. I know that this is something that we're using a formula to determine how much we get reimbursed, but has the town, or is the town capable of doing a report to see what the cost actually is, to see if this is something that we profit from?
Certainly, town staff has the expertise to put time and resources into that sort of analysis. We haven't done that, but if council believes that's a priority, we could, direct some of our staff to do that. At this point, the formula, just to remind council, the formula is not anything created by the town. The formula is applied statewide, and it is adopted by all of the university communities in the state. And the formula is prepared by the Illinois Municipal League. And so everyone uses the same type of formula when you're home to a university institution in Illinois. So if council wanted staff dedicated to do that kind of analysis, if we thought it was of value in some sort of decision-making process, we could do that, but we haven't done that.
Okay, thank you. I would just put out there that without knowing what the actual cost is, it's hard to make a decision whether it's profitable, or if we should look at it or not even look at it. So I'll just leave that out for you to decide if it's worth having your staff look into it or how much time it would take. But I would be very welcome to actually seeing a number. Thank you.
Sure. I guess I would ask if other council finds it of value, because I don't think we would, I'm not sure we would get into the position of trying to negotiate our own agreement with Illinois State. But if council believes that we should, we can do that.
No, kind of interesting. And Mr. Nord, I don't think you meant to say that to check to see if we're making a profit. We're looking to cover our costs.
Well, profit or cover our costs. I mean, we don't know unless we do the analysis, but exactly right. We just have no idea. We're in the dark. So,
Mr. McCarthy.
Make sure I lower my hand here. I'll start out just with following up on your comment, is that fire service is not a profit center, and so we're not looking to do fire service for profit. Second, we don't anywhere, for any business or any section of town or any organization, try to segment out what it costs to deliver fire service to a specific address, a specific business, a specific campus, or anywhere. And so if we did that for one, we would have to do it for everybody, and the cost of staff to be able to do that. Also, the General Assembly in their process lays this out, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm off base, Ms. Reese or Mr. Day. But I imagine that there would be significant pressure if the town of Normal was the only one who decided not to participate in the state process. So I'm not sure that that's really the way we want to go. And this really seems like a solution fishing hard for a problem. And so I'm not sure that we have any issues here. And unless there's some indication that this is somehow not working, I see no reason to expend a bunch of staff time to do that. And the risk of the state process agitation and the likely expense that would cost us to swim upstream against the state process, I think would be very, very costly to the taxpayers, and likely would never come to fruition of saving any money. So that doesn't seem like a dog worth chasing, frankly.
Ms. Lorenz.
Thank you. Mr. Nord, I'm just wondering, if we were to go through that exercise and find the number and you didn't like the number, what would you advocate be done for fire protection of the campus?
Sure, I'm glad you asked. To be honest, I don't know what the number would look like or what the outcome would be. Just in business, you've got all this data and costs, and you really don't even know what direction you would go or if there is a problem or not a problem unless you look at it. But one thing that's unique about this is, say, for example, pensions. Pensions, we pay fire pensions out of property taxes. ISU does not pay property tax, so they don't contribute to that. And I know that they pay a significant amount of money according to this formula, which I assume that's why the formula exists. And it's just a curious study to see if the formula is accurate for our community, or if it's to the favor of normal or ISU. But I don't know that there would be any outcome from it because we may not be able to do anything anyway. This is simply just to transparently know what the costs are. I assume that IML has done an analysis somehow to come up with a calculation.
And if I may
that's
follow up
so
with,
that's the justification for my query. I don't have an action item.
Mr. Mayor, if I may follow up with one other question then to Mr. Nord, would that be a good use of taxpayers' dollars for staff to do that? If it's really just kind of an academic exercise?
Well, it depends. If the data is handy, then maybe it doesn't take a whole lot of time. We just had a report from Hudson when they asked us to take over their EMS service. And, I don't know how much time this would take. That would be a question for Ms. Reese. Is this a few hours? Is this a few days? How much effort is this?
Is the question to me? I would say it's probably significant effort because we're talking about fire protection. We're not talking about ambulance runs. We're talking about providing fire service and fire protection to all of the university properties and all of their buildings. So it would be a significant analysis.
Ms. Smith.
Thank you. I just wanted to put on my accountant hat for a moment and respond that I have done what's considered cost allocation, and it does require an understanding of the operation that you're studying. It requires an analysis of what the costs are and making some assumptions to properly allocate that. But if we were to do this for the fire service to the university out of context with what it cost us to provide services to our entire community, it's not really providing us with any meaningful information. And so much of the analysis is dependent upon making assumptions. And in accounting, you can ask someone, what will the numbers show? And a flippant remark that accountants often make is, what do you want it to show? Because it is possible to have the numbers come out to generate a specific answer. And I would just state that in my belief, there are some services that are core to what government is to provide. And I would rank fire service and ambulance service in that category. And if the state has developed this analysis, if any effort were expended to evaluate whether or not this is a fair deal for normal, there would be more benefit to simply digging into those reports and seeing what you can evaluate from that information than for the town staff to take their time and divert them from other tasks to basically rebuild from scratch. Thank you.
Ms. Cummings.
Thank you, Mayor, and also thank you to Mrs. Smith for kind of expanding upon the accounting side of it, I echo a little bit of something you said as well as Mr. McCarthy about also the relationship. If we are not the ones who provide the fire service because we get down too far in the weeds of looking at this, then who will provide the service? And are we being a good neighbor to Illinois State University to begin to question whether or not they're paying in enough to at least cover the services that we're providing? I don't think it would behoove us to necessarily profit because we, as it's been said before, we don't do that with other business when it comes to fire protection. But I think it's, an opportunity for us to get some level of reimbursement through the university. And I just think it continues with our town and gown relationship.
Could you lower your hand, Ms. Cummings? Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The resolution is approved. Item D is a resolution reapproving the final plan of the Iden subdivision at 105 to 111 West Locust Street. Mr. Preston.
Move approval.
Second.
Just a question for staff here. So our approval of this originally back in May, there were a couple conditions that were part of that. The developer did meet all of those with the slight exception of posting of a bond within 90 days, and instead they did a letter of credit. And I know that those two are very similar to each other, but wondering from a staff standpoint if there's any specific reason as to why they did the letter of credit rather than a surety bond or whatever we were looking at originally.
Okay, I'm actually going to ask Mr. Day or Mr. Otto if they can explain the difference in terms of the impact of the letter of credit versus the bond. See which one of them jumps on first. Mr. Otto.
Hi, thank you, Ms. Reese. The option on whether or not to post a bond or letter of credit is typically left to the developer. Both items or both methods of surety are allowed by town code. So it's completely at their option. The letter of credit typically is cash posted with a banking institution, and the sureties can be from an insurance company or other type of vendor that sells those type of bonds.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yep.
Further on this item?
Yeah, that was all I had. Thanks, Mayor.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The resolution is approved. Item E is an ordinance amending Chapter 18 of the Municipal Code concerning personnel, concerning the salary scheduled for classified employees. Ms. Lorenz.
Still moved on this ordinance.
Okay. Second.
Thank you. Ms. Lorenz.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I know we're talking a lot tonight about maybe budget and costs and things of that nature, and I really want to call out this one as a win-win because it is a cost savings right now. And certainly, as noted in the report, it helps our budget concerns. And secondly, it's a revision streamlining a decades-old process. And I think that is, of course, always good to strive for more efficiency and simplification of processes. So I wanted to tee this one up as a win-win and offer positive remarks for the staff and the HR department who thought creatively and innovatively and didn't let the "we've always done it this way" hold them back. So with that, I think this is a great step forward. Thank you.
Mr. McCarthy.
Ms. Lorenz beat me to it, but I do just want to compliment staff. This was proactive on Ms. Reese, your part, and staff to bring this to us. as a way to streamline and save a little bit of money. And we know you're always working hard, but we appreciate when you can come up with wins like this for us. So thanks very much for all the ongoing continued work to keep our finances in order and as productive as possible. Thank you.
Mr. Nord.
Thank you. The way that I understand this is that this budget or the CPI increase is going to be automatically approved with the budget next year, with the entire budget. Is that accurate?
Well, council formally adopts the budget every March. In that budget adoption process, we will explain to council what's in the budget. We'll have an ordinance identifying information from the budget, and in their ordinance and in our council report, we will call out what the cost of living adjustment is for our classified salary schedule. So in terms of automatic, no, it does require council approval, but it will be along with one vote to adopt the budget. It will be part of that budget adoption process.
Okay, so then for the time when the public can talk about this, when is that if they want to comment on it? Is it at that budget discussion meeting? Is it the night of the vote?
It could be during the budget discussion meeting. Let's see, we probably wouldn't know the December 31st CPIU until early February. The budget work session that council has is usually the second or third week in January, but someone could talk about cost of living adjustments during the budget work session. We could also have public comment when the night the council adopts the budget, and then a public hearing discussion on the budget. So there are a few opportunities when citizens could voice an opinion about our classified salary schedule.
If you'll recall, Mr. Nord, when we approve the budget, there is a public hearing prior to that for people to make comment. That's required by law.
Yeah, the budget discussion we had is a day-long event. So I just wanted to make sure that that was not the time where they had to come in and talk about it, because that's a long day for the public. Now, with the current plan and process of the town, if it's over $25,000, that needs to come to the council for approval. But this, we're going to bypass it, and it will just be blanket with the budget. I am not in favor of this, because the budget approval should just be for doing that, approving a budget. A budget approval should not blanket approve individual expenses. I hear the council speaking sometimes saying that some items were approved because we approved the budget, and then we've got things that come before us that are above a certain dollar amount, and we're approving it because they're above a certain dollar amount. This is just very inconsistent. I don't have a problem with us talking about CPI just once a year, but I do not support it being in conjunction with the same vote for approving the budget. So I'm interested to hear if there's any support in decoupling these so that way they are voted on separately.
I will answer first and say that no, there is no support for me on that, because we do have a transparent budget process. We approve many, many things within the budget. And so we don't know what that number is year to year, although we have put a ceiling on that number. If it exceeds a certain percentage, then it does come to council. So I'm very comfortable with this process. Ms. Smith.
Just for clarification purposes, so Bloomington already has this process in place, is that correct?
Well, Ms. Smith, most of Bloomington's employees are covered by a collective bargaining agreement. So their collective bargaining agreements, like ours, are generally multi-year. So the Bloomington City Council would adopt the agreement, and then the consecutive wage increases would just be built into the budget process. That's not unlike what we do for our police union and our fire union. Council adopts historically a 4-year collective bargaining agreement. The wages are generally identified, the wage increases on an annual or semi-annual basis, and those increases just occur automatically. It took one council approval to do 4 years of adjustments. In this particular instance, our employees are not represented by a collective bargaining agreement. So we're talking about still getting council approval. It just would be one time a year, and that approval would be along with other things you're going to be adopting.
But for Bloomington, their non-unionized staff, any increases they are receiving comparable to what is in the language for the majority of Normal's non-unionized staff is currently handled in their annual budget process and part of accepting the budget through their review of all of the departments and discussion of any of those items, and then the vote passes what has been created as the budget, incorporating for Bloomington any increases that non-union staff might have been placed into that budget. Is that correct?
I believe that is true. I understand it to be true. I haven't called Bloomington to find out, and I see that our human resources director is on this call. So if she has an opinion otherwise or knows differently, I'll ask her to turn on her camera. But I do believe that to be true, Ms. Smith.
And during the budget workshop, council is provided the opportunity to ask questions. This day-long marathon is provided the opportunity to ask questions of staff and have answers to questions provided them. And so if there's any challenge to any line item on the budget, council is free to do it during that workshop. And working with other council members, if there is any objection, something can be adjusted by majority vote of council. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so this is not really creating anything dramatically different from the way we handle all the other line items on the budget at this time. And it is providing an opportunity for the salaries of our staff to be treated as a budgetary item, just as every other line item is in that budget when we have those workshops, correct?
Correct.
That's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Mr. McCarthy?
Make sure I lower my hand here. Good meeting etiquette. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just want a couple of things is staff spends a tremendous amount of time preparing detailed level budgets and looking at their expenses and line items from training to equipment to supplies to all of these things, right? And so to suggest that we have to look at every single nut and bolt that's purchased item by item would be so ridiculously erroneous that we would spend an entire year just to get through the budgeting process. So I would never support that level of disclosure here. But I also want to make sure that the public isn't confused by Mr. Nord's comments, is that to be clear, employee salaries and employee costs are not purchases. They are employment costs. The $25,000 limit Mr. Nord is talking about is the purchasing policy. That's when we are purchasing services and bidding out contracts and supplies. The purchasing policy has never, ever applied to employee costs. And I don't advocate that it starts. That there's a very good reason for a purchasing policy, and there's a very good reason for a budget and employee costs. And there's very good accounting reasons for doing it that way. And I don't suggest that we confuse the public or that we confuse our accounting in any way and change that policy that we've been following since the town's been doing accounting. So I just want to be clear and make sure that everybody in the community know and the press knows that employee costs are not subject to the purchasing agreement and never have been. Thank you.
Ms. Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Really briefly, I have a question for Mr. Nord. You know, we talked about, you know, there will be transparency, that there will be analytics put around doing the COLA, which is a cost of living adjustment, which is very equal to a market rate increase on salaries that are done in businesses on an annual or biannual basis. So we're not doing something that's unheard of. People who are in the non-public sector do have this, not to mention, and we spoke about it before, these are for our non-union employees who do not have a collective bargaining situation. And so, you know, this is a kind of something that's not unusual. But I have a question for wanting to pull this out. Is it so that we can, or let me change we'll rephrase this. Are you wanting to pull it out just to vote no on it every time? Because it seems like there's going to be reasonable amount of analytics, reasonable amount of transparency put around it. So I leave with the question of, why is it that we want to look at it so separately outside of what we would normally do throughout the budget process? Is it only to vote no on it?
No, it's not to vote no. This is not a merit increase. This is just a cost of living increase. And well, what was in the budget here this year was $428,000 was budgeted. And that's what was budgeted. What is it? 0.3% is what we would be talking about approving today out of what was budgeted. Ms. Reese, was it 2.5%? Is that what was budgeted?
That is what was budgeted. We try to overestimate and be conservative with our budget estimates. So we put together a 2.5% cost of living adjustment for the year. And looking at April of 2020 and now October, generally October 2020, we budgeted 2.5, and it would have equated to 0.6 for both CPIU changes. So our budget was a little too conservative this time.
Sure, and I think that's perfectly fine for the budget to be conservative, but it's to allow for a discussion like this, answer and question discussion to see how our budgets are doing, and we can identify if we have over budgeted, and we can, you know, have a better gauge on what the rest of the year is going to look like. And we're going to miss out on this conversation if it's included in some other vote. So really, that's what it is to have this engagement.
I would point out that number was budgeted in a pre-COVID-19 world. Ms. Lorenz.
Thank you. You know, I started off with this being a win-win, and I don't want us to forget that it is a cost savings for now, and that it is a good revision of policy to update it to something that I think is more reflective of the, thankfully, low inflation that we've had for a number of years. And to that end, I think it's been shared with all of us that the COLA adjustments have not amounted to much over 2% or right around it most of the past decade. So these are not big swings in adjustments. They are incremental adjustments that happen, as I think Ms. Cummings said, as far as, regular market adjustments. Some businesses choose to do an analysis every 3 years on a given set of jobs, and you'll get that market bump, and then you go along, and then maybe 3 or 5 years later you get another bump. So this is just another way to stay competitive. So I want to make sure that we're clear with that, but I will turn my question over to ask Mr. Nord as in sort of follow up to what Ms. Cummings was saying. Is your concern that this is going to somehow cost taxpayers something more? Or is it truly just transparency? Because I think we've addressed both, and the answer is that there will be an opportunity for that transparency and that discussion to happen in the context of the budget, and that we are being very mindful of what we do budget, and most of the times, if not all of the times, come in well under budget like we are here with actually a savings then. So is it transparency, or is it taxpayers, or what? Mr. Nord, please.
Well, I'm not used to all this question and answer just to me. I put my comments out there and I'm happy to answer the questions. But no, I do think that making this once a year is good. It's going to save staff time. And I'm really not a tax expert or a financial wizard, but I think if we do this once a year, it may actually cost taxpayers less because we wouldn't be compounding interest. That's something maybe Ms. Smith, I don't even know if that even matters, but the one time a year, like I said, I'm fine with that. It's just having that discussion for the transparency. And another question is, let's say that we budgeted 2.5% and inflation skyrockets and the CPI comes out at its 4%. Is it going to come back to the council to say, hey, we need some more money for this? That would be a question as well. It kind of works both ways, because the budget is not actual numbers that we're going to actually spend. We're planning to spend this, and we don't know until we get actual data and bids and the work's actually done as to actually how much something costs. So it very much is transparency.
But just to be clear, we will know what the CPI change has been from the prior calendar year. So when you are looking at the numbers, when you're adopting the budget, and we say the CPIU adjustment for calendar year 2020 is X amount. So we've incorporated that actual CPIU change into our salary schedule. There won't be any modifications as the budget, as we go into the next fiscal year, because we will have known and will apply it effective April 1st. So there won't be mid-year adjustments or anything, because we'll have actual data. Maybe I'm not explaining it clearly, but we would be adjusting it based on what already happened. So hopefully that clarifies that concern.
We've got more. Excuse me, Mr.
Okay.
Norton. We've got more hands up here, and we're really getting into the weeds and kind of in a circular argument here. I would suggest we just go to a vote, unless you're absolutely adamant you want to add to this discussion.
I would simply like to put some clarity out there, because my reading is that 85,000 was the amount devoted to COLA budget increases to date, not the 438,000 or 428,000 that was budgeted. Is that correct?
Well, the 428,000 that Mr. Nord referenced, that was what we budgeted in anticipation of a 2.5% COLA. So we planned for that in our budget. The actual impact from the April 2020 cost of living adjustment was the actual cost to us was 83,000.
Okay, so I want to make sure people understand that 83,000 was the amount of the COLA increase from the prior adjustment, not over 400,000. I just want to make sure that gets into the record. Thank you.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Nay.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The ordinance is approved. That concludes our omnibus agenda. We have 2 items of general orders tonight. And the first is a resolution approving an amended site plan for Evergreen Village at 1701 Evergreen Village Boulevard.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Preston. Is there discussion on this item? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The item is approved. Item 8 is an ordinance to approve a 4-cent per gallon increase in the town's local motor fuel tax with an effective date of December 1st, 2020.
Move this item.
Second.
Thank you. I'd like to begin with a few comments that I have on this issue, and then we'll go to council discussion. We're all struggling in this COVID-19 pandemic. It seems as if we are now daily faced with decisions, both economic and personal, that have no clear positive outcomes. It's just the world we live in right now. Your town council lives in this world as well. We are challenged to maintain our current level of high quality services to our residences and even expand them. Transportation infrastructure renewal and repair is always near the top of that list. We have to balance that in a world of declining revenues. I would like to give a lot of credit to staff and my fellow council members for reducing our general fund expenses by $6.4 million. And likely more cuts will come and strategies will need to come with them as well. This has been the result of a reduction of personnel, cutbacks in programs, and a more conservative approach to our vehicle replacement policies. Going forward in this, I see 4 possible options. The first is to do nothing and hope for the best. That's a path this council will not take. The second is a reduction of the numbers in public safety personnel, that's police and fire, and diminished levels of personnel and services in garbage pickup, parks and recreation infrastructure and programs, and other services that we are well known for. This is certainly not a desired outcome. Cuts here would take years to reestablish to current levels, and is our first duty to ensure public safety and quality services. This is not a viable option. The third is a property tax increase. Clearly, no one wants that. Not this council, not town staff, not your taxpayer. The fourth is the gas tax proposal before you tonight. While many may think this is a wrong choice, it is the best choice given our COVID-19 world. This will generate an additional $1 million a year for our transportation infrastructure needs and give us some flexibility in the general fund to take pressure off of some of the other options I've mentioned here tonight. It has been demonstrated many times in many communities, a gas tax has almost no influence on the price you pay at the pump. Currently, gas in the Twin Cities is almost always the same in Normal as it is in Bloomington. We taxed at 4 cents a gallon, Bloomington taxed at 8 cents a gallon. These are reasons why I feel this action is the best of not great choices, but an appropriate choice given the options. It is why I support this action. We will come out of this pandemic crisis. I have the utmost respect for this council and the town of Normal staff to manage the problems handed to them in this COVID-19 world, and their hard work, vision, and drive to move us to a better place through economic development and enhancement of quality of life. It has always been our desire and drive to take Normal to a place in which we are all able and proud to live in, and that is what we will do. So I look forward to the comments and discussion going on here tonight. And Ms. Smith, you have the first hand raised. It's to you.
Yes, thank you. I know there has been a lot of concern about raising this gas tax. But first, though, I want to correct some misinformation. Any proceeds from this gas tax will not be used for the underpass. The underpass is not part of normal budget priorities at this time, and it is unfortunate that a member of this council is spreading that misinformation. To the roads. Normal is responsible for 430 miles of roads within our town limits. To put that into context, this is equivalent to the miles required to drive from Cairo on our southern border to Rockford on the north. That's a lot of asphalt. Road work is expensive. I printed out some quotes from the last 3 budget years. $450,000 in 2020 for sidewalks, $422,000 in 19 for sidewalks. In 2018, $1.8 million for general street resurfacing, and that only got us about 10 streets. It's a fact of life that most road projects are at least 6 figures. The average annual spend of motor fuel taxes, that's the state shared gas tax funds, is $2 million. The average annual spend of town transportation funds, primarily our local motor fuel tax, is $1.3 million. Additionally, out of our operating budget, we spend about $4.5 million in operating costs to maintain the town's roadways, primarily due to the work provided by engineering and public works staff. Road work delayed becomes more expensive as regular maintenance postponed can increase the need for more costly repaving. To paraphrase Irma Bombeck, it is like stringing beads without a knot on the end. No sooner will we completely repave every last street in Normal than we will need to turn around and start over with our earlier projects. I have been hearing from a number of residents who have expressed their displeasure at the prospect of this tax being approved. But as the gentleman who spoke and made comments, and as one of the frequent correspondents to the council have been, they acknowledge that roads are in need of repair. Taxes are the only income source that governments have. The motor fuel tax is a user tax that closely aligns with the programs it funds. A counter argument is made that Normal should be able to cut expenses to cover any transportation infrastructure needs beyond what we are currently paying for. The mayor has pointed out, year to date, we are addressing the pandemic and making cuts and working to live within our budget. It is a reality that Normal cannot operate at a deficit. So regardless, cuts will have to be made. There is historical precedence for recognizing that Normal has made cuts. In just 2017, several positions were cut, some purchases were deferred, and permanent program cuts totaling $350,000 were made, including cutting the Dropbox recycling sites that were popular for some residents. So cuts do get made, they will have to be made. However, I do not agree with the scorched earth mindset that seeks to starve government of any new revenue sources in order to obtain drastic cuts at all levels indiscriminately. Illinois barely survived this tactic in recent years, and the end result was the loss or reduction of services to our most vulnerable residents. There are a number of social service agencies that close their doors, and those populations that they serve have gone without, or they've had to travel further to get the services they need. It requires a budget, a workable budget, in order to meet the needs that our residents need and deserve. This is a 4 cents per gallon, not 4%, 4 cents per gallon. regardless of what vendors do with the price, what the market does. If the price of gas goes up, the 4 cents is what gas is asking for. And it does not have any built-in adjustment to increase it down the road. Finally, I want to counter the discouraging message that normal is driving citizens away. As evidence, I point to just tonight, we have one of our elderly residential communities applying for an expansion of 44 units to their site. Just earlier this summer, Crunch Fitness became a new tenant in the shops at College Hill and signed a 15-year lease. We have new soccer fields in planning stages on Towanda in a prime location central to our normal residents. Phoenix Enterprises stepped forward to purchase what was the Wildwood site. And just on Saturday, the announcement was made in the Panagraph that the raising campaign for the new YMCA and Easter Seals exceeded expectations so they can begin constructions. Yes, the pandemic is bad. Yes, it is infecting some people more than others, and that's a horrible situation. But as Mayor Coos has pointed out, this is the best of bad decisions, and sometimes that's all you can do. And on a lighter note about our story as a state, in today's paper, Flix Facts reported that a recent poll by WalletHub.com reported that Illinois residents ranked 20th in terms of happiest state, beating out Arizona, North Carolina, Texas, Georgia, and yes, Florida. I know that this is not something people want to see, but I say let's be penny wise and not pavement foolish. And my vote will be to increase this gas tax. Thank you.
Ms. Cummings.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Smith. I will not try to overlap your wonderful comments that you made tonight. This is a time where we will see political courage, and it's about values and principles and where we stand during a tough time. Some things I want to give people about tonight is kind of a mathematics situation. When I took apart all of this that's going on, I actually drove around Bloomington Normal for a couple hours, and I wrote down every cost of gas stations last night. On the lowest amount that was found was $1.99, and the highest amount was $2.29, and that was both in Bloomington and Normal. However, the average gas price per gallon in Normal was $2.11, and Bloomington's turned out to be $2.07. To break that down, I want to give you a scenario. The average car needs 12 gallons of gas. If you purchased it at $1.99, this exercise also includes the federal excise tax of 18 cents per gallon and the state MFT of 38 cents per gallon. With that being said, gas per vehicle is roughly $24. If you break that down, at the end of the day, a gas station business in Normal would yield about $16.80, and a Bloomington would yield about $16.32. And that's with the 48-cent difference per gallon of gas, on a 12-gallon gas tank, because a car in Normal we would only receive 48 cents, while Bloomington gets 96 cents. That is just from looking at $1.99. However, looking at the averages for the gas, in Normal, a gas station would yield $18.12 for a vehicle with an average gas tank of 12 gallons, while Bloomington would yield $18.02 with only a 10-cent increase. Therefore, based on prices as set today, gas stations are making in Normal only making 10 cents more per vehicle, but with average gas prices being 4 cents higher, this would make you think that maybe more gas stations would already be here in Normal, because I know that's something someone said that they would leave. Probably not. Actually, there's more gas stations in Bloomington. Things to consider beyond just the breakdown of the dollars and cents. In our capital investment budget of 2020 to 2025 on page 29, we show that the motor fuel tax expense is greater than the revenue until 2021-2022, with the return of the expense being greater than the revenue later on down the line. However, we've experienced COVID-19. This will potentially change what we thought may have been a short-term one-year increase, leaving us still with a gap between revenue and expense if we move forward as planned with the capital projects. Speaking of capital projects, according to the same capital investment plan on page 180, we gave staff direction to increase concrete and asphalt pavement repairs and increase sidewalk repair programs. From campaign politics of at least one of my colleagues, the sidewalk repairs were to be included, making sure we worked with Connect Transit to ensure bus stops were accessible for all residents. How many of us remember getting that photo of a resident in a motorized scooter who didn't have access to the sidewalk? Now we hear that, sure, we still need the sidewalks, but we don't want to pay for them. We have to think beyond just the moment today. We know that it seems harder to accept that we are in a difficult situation. The reality is gas is not necessarily determined by an increase in the tax, especially at 4 cents. Gas is determined by the market price and the price per barrel. I encourage and implore that my colleagues will take political courage during such a difficult time to make sure that we can continue to move our community forward, because that's what we vowed to do. We are a progressive community, always looking ahead, always planning ahead, and never looking just for the moment. We know that little will change if we don't change it. I thank you all for your time and have a good night.
Mr. McCarthy.
Sure, I'll lower my hand here. Thanks, Mayor. I try not to overlap too much of what I've heard already, but I guess I want to start off. Certainly, there's been a bunch of misinformation out there in the community about what we're doing tonight and the impact of it and what's part of this. So I want to clarify a little bit. Make sure it's crystal clear and that the members of the media hear it and anybody who's listening or watches this video hears it, that, you know, the proposal tonight is to fund more transportation related infrastructure work that citizens are asking for. And plain and simple, this is a straightforward issue for me, really. The citizens want more infrastructure investment, plain and simple. You know, we've increased infrastructure and roadway work and sidewalks and signs and all of the stuff that we talked about in our work session pretty dramatically in the last 4 to 5 years. I believe some in-depth comments have already been made. I won't go there, but we've increased that spending substantially. But, you know, our citizens are still reaching out and telling us they want us to do more, and in some cases demanding that we do more. Even this spring, while the pandemic's going on, we hear, you know, they want more sidewalk work, they want road work, they want more ADA ramp work done. Ms. Cummings just pointed out the sidewalks for buses and for ADA accessibility, and that was all brought out as we must do that. And so, you know, there's a cost to doing more, plain and simple. It costs more to do more. And I agree with the mayor. This is the best of not great options. You know, the situation is tough. What's happening right now, I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I do want to highlight something that I think the mayor touched on, and maybe somebody else, is that, you know, first, I guess I want to say I've spent a lot of time since the packet came out looking at historical data. more than I ever imagined I ever would. And I've learned a lot. But first, I guess I want to say that I'm glad I'm not in the gas station business. You know, gas prices fluctuate so quickly and so wildly that this has got to be a very challenging business at times for gas station owners. So if gas station owners are listening, my respect goes out to all of you for what you do, and thanks for doing that. But what I've also learned, and I was actually pretty surprised that what Mayor said, and I knew gas was a commodity, but I've learned that so far from the data that small changes in local motor fuel tax has not impacted gas prices at the pump at all. In actuality, today, you've heard this, Ms. Cummings went around, I was a little more lazy and just checked on Gas Buddy this morning and checked it out, and prices were ranging in the top 15 that I looked at were $1.99 to $2.07, spattered out throughout Bloomington Normal. The gas prices were slightly higher in Normal, but basically the same price all the way across. But we're paying less today in gas prices than any time when local motor fuel tax was added to gas station fuel. We are. So back in 2015, when the first local motor fuel tax, the only motor fuel tax that went into place in Normal, gas prices were $2.71. They're about $2, a little over $2 today. In 2019, the average price of fuel in our community was $2.92, reported by the Pantograph, and as high as $3. That's when Bloomington did their last increase. Today, it's $2. So it's not true that small changes in local motor fuel tax reach into our pockets and come out of our pockets. If it were true, why are we paying almost $1 less per gallon than April 2019? It's not true. Gas is a commodity and large market forces set the prices, not what this proposal is going to do tonight. It's just simply not true. I also want to make sure that we don't lose sight of something. I've had a number of conversations with people that reached out. I talked to 4 people this weekend face-to-face to ask their opinions. In addition to too many hours looking at my computer screen about this. And something that I want to clarify, because the citizens I've talked to seem to not know this, is that if you go to Bloomington and you buy gas, the city of Bloomington gets 8 cents per gallon to do road work, to do infrastructure, transportation work. If you buy that same gallon and pay the same price, because the gas price is the same on average, in Normal, the town only gets 4 cents to do infrastructure work, but we're paying the same price. The data shows us that the price isn't going to be impacted at all, but we're paying the same price. Normal citizens deserve to be getting the same amount per gallon to do road work in Normal in our own community if we're paying the same price, plain and simple. The reality is that the gas prices are going up by big market forces. You can read on AAA, you can read on any authoritative source about the fuel industry, about the large swings. I'll leave you with this as far as data and pricing goes. In 2012, we saw gas prices soar above $4 per gallon. There was no local motor fuel tax, zero. So why are we paying half now if local motor fuel tax costs taxpayers dollars? The simple answer is it doesn't. I want to touch on something that I think has been mentioned. Ms. Smith talked a little bit about it. I want to make sure I highlight it, is that an investment in infrastructure means that we're investing in economic development. You know, we've seen companies come here like Brandt. We've seen Rivian come here. We've seen Distill Brewing come here, and that I'm just naming a few of the larger ones. All of those projects required infrastructure investment by the town, some ahead of time, some during, right? All of them required infrastructure investment. And all of those projects have brought jobs and economic opportunity to our community. And so what do we know? We know that we have to continue to invest in our infrastructure to do good economic development. All of our big projects that are bringing jobs require that. Now we see that there's some potential opportunities out on West College. It's going to require more investment in infrastructure. And there's other areas in the community. And so to attract business and grow local business and grow jobs, staying on top of our infrastructure and continuing to invest is important. A little bit, the mayor touched on the front side. You know, some people have talked to me about and commented about gas tax right now during what's going on with COVID and the town of Normal budget. And I just want to address that, not in as depth as everybody else, is to say that, you know, please know, as of April 1st, staff has cut millions, as the mayor mentioned, 6.5 million in emergency expense cuts. And more are likely to happen. And, you know, again, I want to thank Ms. Reese and staff for your work. You've asked for our input, but essentially Ms. Reese, Mr. Hune, and the department heads have made those cuts and proactively are working hard to manage our budget. And I appreciate that. Also, you know, COLA, we just took another action, although, you know, much smaller, 428,000 down to 80-some thousand is a fairly substantial cut. We are looking at budget and ways to make changes to cut expenses, so please know. And also don't forget, we're about to go in, for my council counterparts and for the public, we're about to go into budgets, in the budget cycle. And you heard about 3 different times that we're going to talk about the budget, 3 different opportunities for the public to give input. I'm guessing nobody here, none of my counterparts here are going to be surprised at what I'm about to say. But we're going to have to make some tough decisions about our budget. We are. That's the long and the short of it. We're going to have to make tough decisions. And we will. We always have. As the comment was made in 2017, we cut $2.5 million in positions out of our budget. We've faced some tough times. We managed through it, we made cuts, and we kept going, and we've been the better for it. So I guess I just, hopefully I'm not going over my 10 minutes yet, but just to be clear, you know, citizens are asking us to do more work, and that's why we're considering this proposal. It has absolutely nothing to do with underpass or any other rumors or myths that are going on. You've heard that we've increased transportation spending already. You've heard that citizens want more. We've all gotten those emails. Each and every one of us have gotten them in our inbox this spring asking us to do more. And data shows us that gas prices that we pay out of pocket are unaffected by what we do by small increments. I guess the last thing I want everybody to consider, to the citizens that are asking us to increase spending on transportation infrastructure, roads, sidewalks, curbs, ADA stuff. Thanks.
Mr. Nord.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to point out one thing before I got into, well, the point of what I want to talk about. This local motor fuel tax is not the only source that we have to fund our roads. The state gives us 1% from their, or from the sales tax that's on there. We also have our local tax that's on there as well. That's another 2.5% that comes back here. Then of the state motor fuel tax, we now get 19, or actually we get, Ms. Reese, is it 10 cents now? It was 5 cents before they raised it. Now it's doubled. Is that correct?
Mr. Nord, was that, are you referencing the state, the town share of this?
The town share of the states, yeah, the state had their 19-cent tax, and then they doubled that.
Correct.
And we were getting five cents. Did we get an additional 5 cents whenever they doubled that tax?
We do get additional funds from the state through IDOT for a share of the local, the state's motor fuel tax. I'm going to have to defer to Mr. Hune on the exact amount of that.
Well, I don't need the exact amount, but I think that's generally close. So just that there are more sources. This 4-cent or 8-cent local motor fuel tax we're talking about is not the only funding source for roads. And, you know, I do agree that we should prioritize more of our spending towards repairing our roads. But, you know, this is a priority decision that we have to make as a council, because just here earlier tonight, we saw we're going to save a lot of money from the COLA not being as high as what we thought. And that money could be diverted into the roads. We spent additional money this year that was not budgeted to remove or to put some power poles underground. You know, so there's a lot of non-critical spending that we're doing. We're choosing not to put it into our roads, into other things that are not critical. We've got hundreds of thousands of dollars that we pour into underpass work. The one uptown rent, we still choose to pay that as a higher priority than to address our roads. But back to what I was going to point out, I do believe we should be spending more on our roads, but I don't believe raising taxes during a pandemic, and especially when the financial crisis impacts so many of our residents. Now, that being said, if we do have to raise taxes, then let's try and make this the best policy we can. And what I mean by that is, hear me out. Taxpayers, we've been told that these additional taxes, whether it's for roads or schools or whatever it is, that they will go to that advertised reason. Well, after the fact, somehow much of the money that's collected never makes it there. So if we're going to raise the fuel tax, then, and we're going to say that it's to repair our roads, then let's do whatever's in our power to ensure that all of the local fuel taxes actually go towards repairing and maintaining the existing infrastructure. You know, if it's new infrastructure, there's going to have to be new money that comes up for that. So this is just repairing existing infrastructure. So to do this, I would like to propose we amend the ordinance, because as it's written, this ordinance only addresses the additional 4 cents that it must go towards transportation infrastructure. So I would like to see that the full 8 cents is going towards our infrastructure. The other piece would be that a lot of the taxes that our constituents currently pay, they already go to fund department overhead. Well, this ordinance allows for this local motor fuel tax to fund overhead. So I would propose that we strike the language that allows the money to be used for overhead or any new construction projects, and leaving only the language that would allow this money to be used for actual repairs of existing transportation services. And when I say transportation, this would be vehicular, sidewalks, you know, roads, sidewalks, streets, but those surfaces. So if there's interest, then I would like to formally propose these amendments, because, or these, amendments, because I hear that we all say we want this money to go to our roads. So let's put our money where our mouth is, and actually make this ordinance where it is airtight, that the money has to go into existing surface repairs.
So just to be clear, Mr. Nord, would you state in one sentence the amendment you're proposing?
Sure. So I propose that we amend the ordinance and strike the words increase the rate from 0.04 per gallon to, so strike that. And then strike everything after the words existing local, and replace that with the words street and sidewalk infrastructure surfaces. And then after, I guess, Ms. Reese looks at that, if she could read it and then let us know if we make these changes, how airtight is this language? I mean, is there any provision or something else within this ordinance that would allow this money to circumvent going towards these surfaces?
I'd ask you to hold that question until we have the stated amendment. Ms. Reese, I don't know if you were writing that down.
I was taking notes. I'm actually going to defer to the city clerk, who hopefully was, who's the official note taker for in this regard. So we'll see what the clerk can offer in terms of the proposed change.
I don't have the ordinance in front. I wasn't striking the actual ordinance. I was taking notes. But the amendment, or yeah, the amendment would be to strike the 4% or 4 cent to make a full 8 cent towards existing infrastructure repairs.
I can read you the part to strike if you've got it in front of you.
Mr. Nord, I think it'd be really helpful if you strike it on your page and read the amendment you wish to put forward.
Okay, as it's written. Okay, then it would be the proceeds of the tax attributable to the 8 cents per gallon shall be used to fund the repair and maintenance of existing local streets and sidewalk infrastructure surfaces, period.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Discussion on this item?
Mayor Kus, if I could ask for clarification or make sure I understand this clearly from my perspective and first staff's perspective. If this proposed amendment were to be approved, what I heard Councilmember Nord say is that it should not, funds should not be used for operating expenses for the departments. And I just want to be clear, when we're talking about maintenance of existing roads and sidewalks, there's significant maintenance that is performed by the Public Works Streets Division. Our engineering department does many of the projects. I'm not going to say most, I'll say many of the resurfacing projects are designed in-house by our engineering staff. So I definitely have concerns if council is saying that funds should be dedicated to repairs, and yet the departments that are performing and responsible for coordinating the repairs, their expenses are not covered by this. So are we talking just capital expenses or specifically what are we referring to? Because significant work is done in-house.
Well, I would say Mr. Nord wrote it that those items would not be covered.
Okay.
It's with this 8% is all, or this 8 cents is all we're talking about. The other funds, they're already funding that work.
You're out of order, Mr. Nord. Ms. Smith.
For clarification on some of the figures Mr. Nord was looking for, our portion of the state shared gas tax funds are 2 million, and the average for the existing locomotive fuel tax is 1.3 million. But what we apply and pay currently towards staff time and services towards road repair is 4.5 million. So if this is restricted in this way, we would not be able to seek any coverage for those expenses.
Mr. Preston.
Okay.
Thanks, Mayor. I have another question or point, I'm not sure which, of clarification on this. So the way I heard this amendment being proposed discusses existing roads and sidewalks. And to me, I wonder if that limits us to, on roads, filling potholes in contrast to being able to actually resurface an entire street, would that case be considered a new road and as such would not qualify for use under these funds, where we could not actually repave an entire stretch of street because that would not be considered the same, repair and maintenance of the previous street, thus, limiting our ability to repave entire stretches of street and instead just putting potholes and small patches in places. That's certainly a concern. I don't know if that's a question anybody can answer, but
it's not how I understood the amendment. I understood the amendment that would be an existing street. I think that's how I would interpret it.
okay, so repaving an entire stretch of street would fall under repair or maintenance of an existing street rather than repaving it new.
Right. That's how I understand it.
All right.
If I could jump in, and I'm sorry, Mr. Preston, if I interrupted. I understand that to be the intent as well. I did want to point out another example, again, just so before council votes on this, because I don't know how this is going to play out. So while we're still in the discussion phase, I want to make sure this is covered. For example, the Public Works Streets Division has a number of contracts that council has authorized that don't fall under the capital expense category. They fall under the operating expense contractual services for things like crack sealing. And we did Rab Road with a private contractor and such. So that falls under the operating side of things, of which, to be clear, is excluded from using these dollars. So I just want to understand.
Just to give you some reassurance, Ms. Reese, I'm one member of the council, but I don't find this amendment appealing or appropriate or well thought out. So I certainly will not support it. Mr. McCarthy.
Lowering my hand. Ms. Reese, you answered my questions before I asked them, but for all the staff and all the projects, I mean, which are, substantial, we don't get any ability to actually pay for the stuff that actually goes into doing the streets. So if it was that alone, I would, but the word existing also eliminates the ability to do anything new. We can't use road dollars to work on roads or infrastructure dollars to work on new infrastructure. I can't support that.
Ms. Smith.
For clarification purposes, under the way the gas tax referendum is currently worded, absent the amendment, would it be permitted to use those proceeds to assist with the additional request for $100,000 to connect transit, which was a recommendation of the Citizens Working Group after months of research on the topic and a recognition that our current funding levels are not beyond not being sufficient to support their operations, but we're not enabling Connect to fully get the match from state DOPA funds, an unfortunate name. So would the way it is written now, can those gas tax proceeds be used for public transportation support?
I'm going to ask you to hold that question until we get out of the amendment. As the amendment is stated in what we're discussing right now, no, that would not be part of this action that we're taking tonight. Please call the roll on the amendment.
Mr. McCarthy,
No.
Ms. Cummings,
No.
Mr. Nord,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
No.
Mrs. Lorenz,
No.
Mr. Preston,
No.
Mayor Kus,
No, the amendment fails, and now we're back to the original ordinance. Is there further discussion on that? Mr. Preston?
Thanks, Mayor. Something that has continued to stick with me throughout this conversation is there's been a lot of mention by previous colleagues of ours talking about how we have heard from constituents on the importance of infrastructure. And no doubt that is the case. We all have, and we all, I'm sure, have driven on streets and walked on sidewalks of ours that are in need of repairs around Normal. But losing sight of the fact that we have also, at least me personally, and I'm confident just based on the number of emails that have come through, even since the agenda was put out last Thursday, we have also, all of us, heard from a tremendous amount of our citizens who do not want to see their local motor fuel tax increased, or in a lot of cases, any other local taxes increased at this point in time during a global pandemic. And that is an important piece that I don't want to get missed in this conversation, as we are here, all of us doing our best to collectively represent people of Normal and do what's best for the town overall. I want to make sure that both sides of that equation are kind of kept in perspective, that there have been a lot of residents that have reached out and not wanted to support additional increases in taxes, and forgetting that and not doing, not recognizing that publicly is something that personally I'm not comfortable with. And as a result of that, I think it's important that those voices continue to be heard, because they're the ones who will be filling up with gas in our town, and they're the ones that we're ultimately responsible to. And during a global pandemic, when a lot of people are facing financial stresses and have clearly articulated their thoughts on this, that is an avenue that I want to support, being that I will not be voting to increase the gas tax tonight.
Normally, I wouldn't comment to disagree, and I'll just offer it as a contrast, Mr. Preston. And I understand there are people that do not want this. I would offer the counter argument that in the last 10 days, I've been on 110 doors talking to people. It's campaign season in that, and it was not brought up by one person when I was on doors. So yes, there are conflicting opinions, and there are conflicting wants out of this, and you're certainly within your right, and thank you for bringing that up. Ms. Lorenz.
Thank you. Been kind of sitting back and listening, and one thing I want to bring up that I don't think really has been is the role that the gas vendors, the gas station vendors, are playing in all of this. Somebody said that they wouldn't want to be in this business. They have sympathy for the fluctuation. I'm not feeling a whole lot of sympathy for them. If the price had been sensitive, as one would think it would have been, to a tax, a user tax, and that it had adjusted accordingly with the increase from 4 to 8 in Bloomington, and therefore changed the relation of prices in Bloomington versus Normal the way we would have thought it would, we might not be having this conversation. And so I don't want it lost in this conversation that the local gas vendors are kind of messing this up. And what are they doing with the additional 4 cents or 7 cents or whatever it is, the delta between what they're charging and getting in Bloomington, giving 8 cents of it away per gallon to Bloomington, and then what they're charging here and pocketing the difference. I'm not saying that capitalism is bad. But let's not lose sight of the fact of what's really happening here by the gas vendors. So that's one point I guess I want to make. And then the other piece is that I understand the importance of the investment in roads, not only to maintain the road outside of my house or your house, but also for our businesses, right? And for the economic development piece of attracting new businesses here. So that is so important. And and I don't want to minimize that in any way. So in one way, this policy of this gas tax is an interesting one, in that it would shore up our investment, but I look at it a little differently, because I think that the problem that we need to address is not the inequity between us and Bloomington, or what the vendors are or are not doing with their gas prices. But the problem is to really look at our entire general fund and what we have to do with it and how we need to prioritize it. And the number in my mind, probably very conservatively, is $2 million that we probably need to find year after year after year. Not just a one-time cut, not just, oh, we can use this savings from this project, but a $2 million structural adjustment. And so if this policy coupled 900,000 or $1 million worth of a new revenue from a gas tax that seems to not necessarily be sensitive to the price and therefore would not be passed along to the consumer, couple that with another $1 million of cuts, of structural cuts, I think we'd be having a very different conversation. And that's what I've been arguing for and advocating for, is a combination of cuts and, if necessary, a new source of revenue. And this one appears to be one of the most innocuous. But without that conversation, without that holistic approach, I do have a hard time accepting this ordinance today as it is, positioned as it is. And I want to raise that up, particularly the need for cuts. Like I said, the number in my mind conservatively is 2 million. We feel like we're tracking pretty well. So far, so good, knock on wood, coming out of this pandemic, thanks to a lot of good positioning that the town's finances were in going into it. We heard that last meeting at the Condition and Financial Trends report. I hope it's not any worse than 2 million. But that's at least the number we've got to be looking at. Thank you.
Ms. Smith?
Is it possible for clarification on my question about funding of the Connect Transit?
Yes. Absolutely.
Yes, to answer your question, Ms. Smith, we focus the ordinance solely on the town's transportation network. So if council wanted to clearly identify that Connect Transit could be a recipient of funds, we should make it clear. I would recommend we make it clear in the proposed ordinance. That would, of course, require council approval to do that down the road. If this ordinance were to be approved, we would still seek council approval on additional funding of Connect. But this ordinance does not specifically identify the transit system as a recipient.
So is it necessary to amend this ordinance tonight, or when we take up the issue of Connect Transit, is that sufficient time to evaluate whether or not we wish to dedicate some of these dollars for that?
I am going to ask Mr. Day if one way is better than the other. I suspect it would be equally, have the same result if we did it down the road, if council chose to fund Connect Transit by an additional dollar amount. So Mr. Day, your thoughts?
Yes, Mrs. Reese is correct. Right now, I don't think Connect Transit qualifies as transportation infrastructure, so it wouldn't be covered under the existing ordinance. So it would take an act of council to amend that, which could be done either tonight or if you wanted to change the use in the future at a future date.
But as we've not yet taken up the subject of Connect Transit, request for an additional 100,000, it might be more appropriate to postpone any amendment until we tackle that discussion. Am I hearing that as an option, Mr. Day?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Nord?
Thank you. I'd like to echo Ms. Loren's comments. I do agree with you, and thank you for bringing that up and putting it out there on the table. We did also have a new marijuana tax that the town is supposed to be receiving funds for. Have we started receiving that tax revenue, Ms. Reese?
No, not yet, Mr. Nord. The cannabis retailers tax that council authorized was effective July 1st. We will start receiving revenue from that source in October.
Okay, this motor fuel tax doesn't come into effect until December. What's the reason for, or it doesn't come into effect until December? What's the reason for bringing it forward now? Are we able to wait and see where the revenues are for the marijuana tax and see if this is even necessary?
Well, a couple of points to make there. I believe when council adopted the cannabis retailers tax, I think we thought conservatively maybe $250,000 to 300,000. And I don't even know if that's a conservative number right now. And that would be for an entire year. Currently, we're looking at the cannabis tax revenue for a partial year. So it's definitely not anything we plan to be at the same revenue stream or revenue amount as the local motor fuel tax. The timing of this proposed local motor fuel tax, though, was bringing it into council's attention now. Obviously, after the last work session 2 weeks ago, we were directed to bring an ordinance back, so we did. The timing is such that we could, if council adopts this, we can incorporate it into the proposed fiscal year 21-22 budget. We have indicated in our council report that we would give vendors about 60 days notification so that they can prepare to collect an additional 4-cent tax. So if council adopts the ordinance tonight, give us about 60 days. So that's why we picked the December 1st date as an effective date. And then there's a couple months that pass before we actually have receipts. And so that's why we're looking at fiscal year 21-22 for our budget.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, please call the roll.
Mayor.
Oh, Mr. McCarthy.
I thought I had my hand up. I apologize. Yeah, a couple of things I want to comment about. I guess from what I heard, just some follow-ups. The uptown rent was brought up. I just want to remind the public that we have a legal obligation in a contract. We can't just up and walk out and not pay that. There's a lot of legal stuff involved in that, and to suggest that we can just up and quit and start paving roads with that is highly irresponsible statement and does not accurately represent what's going on. And I also
Mr. McCarthy, I'd caution you to keep your comments to the motor fuel tax, if you would.
So if I get the latitude to comment on one of my council members made comments as under this discussion, I think there's some flat out wrong statements that were made and put into the public record by Mr. Nord, and they deserve a response because they are wrong. And so if he was allowed to make those statements, Mayor, with all due respect, there should be allowed to be a rebuttal to those statements.
Proceed, but with caution, please.
Thank you. I will keep them brief, I promise. to insinuate that town funds are not going to where they are intended to go is highly irresponsible. You better be able to show some proof if you show up at a council meeting, a public statement, and prove that funds are being diverted and not going for intentional. That is highly offensive to town staff. They are highly professional and do an amazing job. And we just heard that from our audit review. They get the highest audit review. So to sit here and insinuate that the town of Normal funds somehow get misspent and don't end up the target is flat out wrong. If you have proof, show it. Sorry, Mayor. Thank you. I guess lastly, I just want to redirect a comment. A couple things. One is it is true that our residents don't want taxes, and Mr. Kuster made those comments, and I think I addressed that a little bit. But it's also true that they also want roads. They want both, and that's the reality. And so a couple things. Everybody remember that we're down $3.5 million in revenue. So just want to remind everybody that, and that with all due respect to my colleagues that continue to suggest that asking for gas stations for 4 more cents per gallon means that we're going to pay 4 more cents at the pump, the data shows that that's not true. It just flat out says it's not true. So with all due respect, that statement isn't accurate. Thank you.
And Mr. Nord, you have your hand up, but you and Mr. McCarthy and Ms. Smith have had your 2 rounds of comments by Robert's Rules of Order. Is there anybody else wishing to speak on this before?
I would like to take a point of privilege since I was called out by Mr. McCarthy.
Save that, Mr.
He
Nord.
specifically asked for data.
You're out of order. You're out of order.
It's not a point of privilege. You're not in any peril.
He called me out by my name asking for data. I would like to put on the record, Ms. Reese.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Before I was elected,
Mr. Nord,
you had shared the
Nord,
data.
you are out of order. You have
I'll
had
bring it up at council comments.
Ms. Honker, please call the roll.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
No.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
No.
Mr. Preston,
No.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The ordinance is approved. We have no new business tonight. Before taking a motion for adjournment, are there concerns or comments? Mr. Nord.
Thank you. Ms. Reese, I've got a request. Before I took office, you and Mr. Hewen had put together some information for me on the amount of money that the town receives from all tax sources from sales of motor fuel taxes or from sales of motor fuel. If you can share that with Mr. McCarthy, because it laid out all the revenues we get, and that's where my justification came from for the town gets more money than just the 8 cents that we put towards, that we had talked about tonight. So thank you for putting that together, because that information has been invaluable and I do appreciate it. But my second comment, this is something I wanted to talk with the council about for the CPI. The CPI, that's not a merit increase. This isn't something that you earn for doing good work. This is just what the CPI is supposed to be an adjustment to address increases in the cost of fuel, heat, and rent. So when we use a percentage and just blanket use that for everyone, the disparity for the recipients is significant. If you're at the higher end of the pay scale, 2.5% if you earn $150,000, that's $3,750. Well, if you're at the lower end and you earn, say, $36,000 a year, that's only a $900 savings, or a $900 increase in pay. Well, since the CPI is supposed to adjust for, like I say, food, heat, and rent, the folks at the lower end, they're more affected. If you have a family of four, whether you make a little or a lot of money, your increases in food, heat are similar. You know, if you make a lot of money, you're probably not paying rent. So I think at some point we should consider more of a graduated scale where we're not paying the higher earners so much money as an increase because of CPI. You know, and often their homes cost more and are more energy efficient than those that don't make a whole lot of money. When the percentage is used globally, the higher wage earners who are less impacted by the cost receive a significant bump in pay, while the lower end, who are most impacted by the CPI factors, receive significantly less. And some could argue that when they reach their maximum pay, because in this write-up it said, I think there was, I don't know, 80 or 90 staff members had already reached their maximum pay potential within their current position. They've already reached their cap, that their only way to get an increase is through this CPI. Well, you know, another way to increase would be for them to advance to another position. So they could either stay where they're at or advance to another position, take on additional responsibility, or, you know, move to another location who can afford to keep paying past what the salary cap is. So, you know, we should look at that, because this will also help with the town's fiscal outlook, as paying the CPI for the highest paid earners, who are the least impacted, is also going to burden many of the taxpayers who make significantly less money than our town staff, and they don't receive the premium benefits that we offer, such as free healthcare and lifetime guaranteed pensions. So I'd like us to consider that. I know it's probably going to be a while before the CPI comes back up, but you know, maybe more of an inverted scale, so it helps those that don't make a lot, because it is supposed to be for your bare necessities. So thank you for your time.
Ms. Cummings.
Thank you, Mayor. First, to start off, I do want a point of clarification on something. People who work in the public sector tend not to make a lot of money. And oftentimes, some people don't even go into the public sector, even having the knowledge and education. I've seen a situation where someone is currently in the private sector in a non-management position and would not take a management position within the public sector because they made more money. So the scale in which was being used is quite not that accurate. And so we do the COLA as one of the ways of being competitive up against private sector. Aside from that, I wanted to certainly talk about this something that keeps coming up. If someone has to invoke fear in order to manipulate a response, incite anger, to jolt you into action according to their pleasure and will, I would question their intent and motive. I can persuade by educating, but I can also walk away whether we agree or not. It is not about winning power or getting my will, or have my will prevail. I sit here with a dream about this community, a dream where we have a highly diverse community. We cannot become multi-generational when we refuse to acknowledge what the next wave of home buyers are looking for. I envision a community much different than what I grew up in. In that community, we were begging for businesses to come and were willing to do incentives but the residual impacts of redlining kept them from ever coming. Therefore, there was no money to invest in infrastructure. And the greatest fight was to keep hospitals and fire stations open. I am in a community now who wants the best things for free. Looking at the bigger picture for the greater good of the whole is almost demonized and demonetized. I have learned in community development that municipalities should strive to grow, evolve, and invest. It's about balancing it all so no one suffers more at the comfort of others. And that's all I have to say for tonight.
Ms. Smith.
Thank you. I realize I was passionate tonight when I delivered my comments on the gas tax. And if anyone was offended by that passion, I apologize. It was not intended to be off-putting to any of the residents. As I stated, I do understand that the pandemic is affecting households differently and some very severely. And this is, in my view, a best of the worst decisions presented to us in order to keep our community vital. And in some respects, I feel that I have had a hand in some of the struggles that the transportation budget is encountering, because in the first months of my tenure with the council, when I raised the point challenging the Connect Transit budget, it triggered the creation of the working group. And the working group was created to include a variety of citizens who spent a great deal of time studying the situation. And in large part, the outcry was against a fare increase that for disabled residents reliant on mobility transit, going from the rate that they had been charging to quadrupling it to $4 a ride, not 4 cents, $4. And after all of their work, the group came back and recommended the fares be set the same for any rider. They also did recommend that the commitment from both communities be increased so that Connect Transit could access more of the DOPA funds. In essence, there was a 401k match from the state, and we weren't taking the full contribution to free that. So this calls for more spending on transportation for our most vulnerable residents. As I attended those meetings, I was dismayed to hear someone actually ask how many bus stops need to be ADA compliant. The correct answer is all of them. So there's a backlog of work needed to create accessible bus stops, and in many cases, the sidewalks connecting those bus stops to something. That costs money. Another program that I took a special interest in was the Community Block Development Grant. Previous practice had directed a lot of the funds from that program to roads in the qualifying neighborhoods. I don't presume to tell people what they should do or not do, but I worked to make sure people were aware that the program was up for renewal and to get involved. And I'm happy to report that there was more involvement in that process than ever before. And an outcome of that was that funding was instead prioritized for sidewalks in low income qualifying neighborhoods, which meant those dollars that previously had gone to roads went to sidewalks. It's not the same thing. I believe in the process. I believe that when citizens get involved and have an opportunity to actually dive into the numbers, the applications, the constraints, that they can make informed decisions. And I do care that our most at-risk residents are represented, because I still know that, and it pained me to see the agencies that closed their doors when the state of Illinois went through its budget crisis. And I never want to see that happen again. And so I'm very, very pro having a discussion where people talk about the matters and come to a consensus and respect one another, instead of coming from anger and my way or the highway, or if you don't do it my way, then you're not worth my consideration anymore. There is nothing wrong with compromise, but it takes conversation. It takes people being willing to listen to the other side. And I hope that more of that happens. Thank you.
Ms. Lorenz.
Thank you. Mine is really just a question that maybe can be shared with us at another time. I've got a question about this point of privilege statement of a Robert's Rules, and I always thought that it was for like when somebody in a legislative body called a point of personal privilege, like if your chair was on fire or something, or something devastating was happening to you, were in peril. So I've heard Mr. Nord say that twice now tonight in another meeting, and so it's just it is a very important question in my mind, that I think if this continues to, be brought up, that we are using that and responding to it properly. So my request is for some education on that particular statement. Not now, just, at some point in the future when Mr. Day can provide that to us. Thanks.
Mr. McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. Before I get to my regularly scheduled comments, Ms. Reese, I have the information Mr. Nord asked you to send. Every member of this council has the information Mr. Nord asked you to send. You don't need to bother to resend it. I'm well aware of the sources of revenue for our transportation infrastructure work. I've been on the council. This will be my 9th budget process. I'm well aware of those sources. Mr. Nord, that in no way provides any evidence of misappropriation of funds. Again, that is an extremely serious insinuation and charge that you made tonight. Prove it, or come back to this council, come back and you publicly apologize, just as publicly as you insinuated that they've been misappropriating funds. Ms. Smith, thanks, and I agree. True representation means asking for and listening to public input to shape what we do and make choices and decisions on behalf. It's not trying to influence people and tell them what they should be doing. Last but not least, we have just until the end of the month, September 30th, to complete census. Participation only takes about 10 minutes. There's only 10 questions if you haven't done it yet. A complete count is gonna give our community 10 years of benefits and funding, and we won't be able to do this for 10 more years. So please, if you haven't already, go to 20census.gov and fill it out. Go to the town Facebook page. There's a link there to fill it out. I think they're even giving away t-shirts if that matters to you. But please, before the September 30th, go fill out the census and help advantage our community as much as we can for the next decade. Thanks.
Ms. Reese, I think you may have it or staff will. Is it 2020 census.gov? Is the link that Mr. McCarthy was.
It's census.gov. I thought it was census 2020, but is it, Mr. Hanson, is it 2020 census or census 2020?
The town Facebook page says 2020 census.
2020 census, okay.
Okay.
.gov.
All right, we're clear. So to reiterate what
Thanks, Harry.
McCarthy said, 2020 census.gov if you haven't signed up yet. Could I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings, Mayor Kus.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you. Good discussion tonight.